It started as a dare. My buddies, drunk off cheap beer, thought it would be hilarious to send me into Eloise Psychiatric Hospital alone. The place had been abandoned for decades, but everyone in Westland knew the stories, whispered tales of patients who never left, and doctors who played God. I didn't believe in ghosts, not then. The air inside the hospital was cold, damp, and heavy with mildew. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing long, crumbling hallways. Rusted gurneys and shattered glass littered the floor. Every step I took echoed like I wasn't alone, though I was, or so I thought. 5 minutes and I'm out, I muttered to myself, trying to sound braver than I felt. The first floor was uneventful, just decay and silence. It wasn't until I climbed the stairs to the second floor that things felt wrong. The temperature dropped, and the air became thick, almost suffocating. My flashlight flickered. "Damn it!" I cursed, tapping it.
"I've been watching you."
I froze. The voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it came from directly behind me. I spun around, my flashlight jerking wildly, but the hallway was empty. "Hello?" I called, my voice cracking. "Who's there?" No answer, just the sound of my breathing, ragged and uneven. I pressed on, though my legs felt like lead. The further I walked, the more it felt like the hospital was watching me. Doors creaked, shadows danced on walls where they shouldn't, and the whispers grew louder.
"They hurt us. Don't you see?"
The voice came again, but this time it sounded like a chorus. Multiple voices layered over one another. Panic clawed at my chest, but I couldn't turn back. Something compelled me forward, deeper into the dark. I stumbled into what must have been the treatment room. Rusted surgical tools were scattered across a metal table, their surfaces stained with something dark and crusted. On the wall, faded writing in red paint. Or was it blood? Read, "Help us." The door slammed shut behind me. "Who's there?" I shouted, spinning around. My flashlight flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. And then I heard it. The sound of bare feet shuffling on the tile. It circled me, slow and deliberate.
"You don't belong."
The whisper came again, right next to my ear. I screamed, fumbling with my flashlight. It sputtered to life, and for a brief moment, I saw them. Patients in tattered hospital gowns, their eyes hollow, their mouths twisted in silent screams. One stepped forward, a woman with a twisted neck.
"He's watching,"
she said, her voice gurgling like water over rocks. "Who?" I stammered, backing away. "The doctor," they all said in unison, their heads snapping toward the far corner of the room. I followed their gaze, and my heart stopped. A figure stood there, tall and thin, wearing a blood-stained lab coat. His face was pale, his eyes sunken pits of darkness. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice low and guttural. The lights exploded, plunging the room into pitch black. Hands grabbed at me, cold, skeletal hands that tore at my jacket and pulled at my arms. I screamed, thrashing wildly. Somehow, I broke free. I don't remember how I made it back to the entrance, but I ran until I collapsed outside, gasping for air. My friends found me hours later, huddled by the car, unable to speak. I never told them what happened inside. I never went back. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear the whispers again.
"I've been watching you."
I never considered myself easily scared, not even by the macabre tales of Yorktown Memorial Hospital. The abandoned hospital had become infamous, the subject of local legends and paranormal documentaries. Its dark corridors and crumbling walls whispered of pain, loss, and perhaps something worse. In October of 1995, I found myself driving through Yorktown on my way to visit a friend in San Antonio. I didn't plan to stop, but a sign on the road caught my eye. Yorktown Memorial Hospital tours, enter if you dare. A dare? It felt ridiculous. Who would fall for that tourist trap? Yet curiosity gripped me. Before I knew it, my car was parked, and I stood before the decaying structure. The hospital loomed like a great beast, its windows like hollow eyes, staring into my soul. A volunteer, an older woman with grey hair tied into a bun, greeted me at the door. "Careful where you wander," she said with a grim smile. "This place has a way of getting into your head." I laughed it off, stepping through the creaking double doors. The air inside was damp and carried a faint metallic tang. As the volunteer handed me a flashlight, she said something I'd later regret not heeding. "If you hear someone call your name, don't answer." The tour started innocently enough. A group of about 10 of us followed the guide through the first floor. She recounted the hospital's history from its construction in 1951 to its eventual closure in the late 1980s. The place had seen hundreds of deaths, some natural, some accidental, and some shrouded in mystery. I half listened, distracted by the sensation of being watched. By the time we reached the ICU, the group had dwindled. A few people grew uneasy and left early. I stayed, drawn by a mix of morbid curiosity and the thrill of the unknown. The ICU was suffocatingly dark, even with my flashlight. Rusted gurneys lined the walls, and a faint, rhythmic creaking echoed down the hallway. It sounded like a rocking chair, but I couldn't see where it was coming from. The guide warned us not to separate, but as I turned a corner, the light from the group disappeared. I was alone. The silence was oppressive. My footsteps echoed, but something about the sound was off. It didn't match my pace, as if another set of feet shuffled just behind me. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Nothing. "Hello?" My voice sounded small and foolish against the cavernous halls.
We see you.
The whisper was soft, barely audible, but close. Too close. "Who's there?" My voice trembled now. The rocking creak returned, louder this time, accompanied by faint footsteps. I backed away, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. The beam wavered as I swept it across the hall. Then I saw her. A nurse, or what used to be a nurse, stood at the end of the corridor. Her uniform was faded, her cap askew, and her skin translucent. Her face was a patchwork of shadows and empty hollows.
Leave. Leave.
She hissed, her voice an icy wind slicing through the dark. I stumbled back, the flashlight flickering. She took a step forward, her movements jerky, unnatural.
This place is not for the living.
She crooned, her voice echoing like 1,000 whispers. I turned and ran, the hallway stretching endlessly before me. My breath came in gasps, and my heart hammered in my chest. When I finally stopped, I realized I was in the basement. The air was colder, the darkness thicker. Pipes overhead groaned, dripping water onto the cracked tile floor. My flashlight caught a rusted metal sign, Morgue. I didn't want to be there, but it felt as if the hospital had guided me. My feet moved of their own accord, drawn to the heavy steel door at the end of the hall. Inside, the room was eerily pristine, as if time had forgotten it. The morgue tables gleamed under the pale beam of my flashlight. Drawers lined the walls, some slightly ajar. A faint scratching sound came from one of them.
Don't open it.
A voice rasped, low and guttural. I whipped around. No one was there.
Don't open it.
The voice repeated, this time louder. My hands trembled as I approached the drawer. The air grew colder with each step, and my breath fogged in the beam of light. The scratching intensified, desperate now, nails clawing against metal. Against every instinct, I gripped the handle and pulled. The drawer was empty. For a moment, relief washed over me. Then, slowly, a hand emerged from the darkness within. It wasn't human. The skin was grey, stretched taut over bony fingers tipped with jagged nails. The hand gripped the edge of the drawer, and a face followed. A distorted, snarling visage with hollow eyes and a mouth that stretched impossibly wide.
You let me out.
It growled, its voice a guttural roar that shook the walls. I screamed, slamming the drawer shut. The thing inside howled, a sound that reverberated through the morgue and into my bones. I ran, the hospital twisting around me. Corridors led to dead ends, once open doors slammed shut. Whispers filled the air, voices overlapping in an incomprehensible cacophony.
Stay. Join us. You can't leave.
I tripped over debris, falling hard onto the cold tile. The flashlight skidded out of reach, its beam illuminating a figure standing just ahead. The nurse again. She tilted her head, her face splitting into a grotesque grin.
They'll all come back,
she said, her voice dripping with malice. I don't know how I found the exit, but when I burst through the front doors into the night, the cold air felt like a baptism. The hospital stood silent behind me, its windows dark and lifeless. The volunteer was gone. My car was the only one in the lot. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a split second, I saw the nurse standing in the doorway, her black eyes following me. I haven't been back to Yorktown since, and I never plan to, but sometimes when I'm alone in the dark, I still hear her voice.
You'll come back. They always do.
I didn't believe in ghosts when I stepped into the old Tooele hospital on that freezing January night. The building, abandoned since the 90s, had gained a reputation as one of Utah's most haunted places. I'd heard the stories, shadowy figures, phantom whispers, but I dismissed them as local lore. I was here for a thrill, not a haunting. The air was colder inside, biting at my face and hands. My flashlight barely penetrated the darkness, revealing cracked tiles, sagging ceiling panels, and graffiti scrawled across the walls. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint creak of the building settling. Just a quick look around, I muttered, more to reassure myself than anything. I started down a long corridor, the beam of my flashlight flickering. The hospital's layout was disorienting. Every hall looked the same, lined with empty rooms that yawned like open mouths. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, as if something was following just out of sight. "Hello?" I called, my voice trembling slightly. It was a mistake. A faint whisper answered. "You shouldn't be here." I froze. The voice wasn't mine, and it wasn't far. It was soft, almost sing-song, but laced with menace. I spun around, my flashlight jerking from wall to wall. Nothing. "Get it together," I whispered, forcing myself to move. The stairwell loomed ahead, the metal railing coated in rust. Against better judgment, I descended. The air grew colder, heavy with the smell of mildew. At the bottom, I found the morgue. The morgue door was ajar, swinging slightly as though beckoning me inside. My stomach churned, but my curiosity overrode my fear. I pushed the door open, the hinges screeching in protest. The room was unnaturally pristine. The steel autopsy table gleamed under the weak light of my flashlight, and the rows of storage drawers seemed untouched by time. A small pile of dusty medical tools sat on a tray nearby, as if someone had left in a hurry. Then I heard it. A low, guttural laugh echoed from one of the drawers. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice cracking. No response, just the soft, thunk thunk of something tapping from inside one of the drawers. My heart pounded as I approached, every fiber of my being screaming to turn and run. Instead, I reached out, gripping the cold handle. "Don't!" a voice rasped from behind me, so close I felt its breath on my neck. I spun around, but no one was there. The room was empty. The tapping grew louder, more frantic. Against my better judgment, I pulled the drawer open. It was empty at first. Then slowly a figure began to materialize, a pale woman with hollow eyes and tangled hair spilling out like a grotesque marionette. Her head twisted at an unnatural angle as she grinned up at me. "You opened it?" she hissed. I stumbled back, the drawer slamming shut on its own. The woman's laughter filled the room, a cacophony that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I bolted from the morgue, my flashlight shaking in my hands. The hospital seemed alive now, the walls groaning and shifting as if they were breathing. Shadows danced at the edges of my vision, moving faster the harder I tried to focus on them.
Stay with us.
A childlike voice giggled from the darkness. "No!" I shouted, breaking into a run. The hallways stretched endlessly, each turn leading me deeper into the labyrinth. Doors slammed shut as I approached, herding me like prey. A shadowy figure darted ahead, disappearing around the corner. I burst into a large room filled with rusted hospital beds. My flashlight flickered, then died, plunging me into darkness. I fumbled with it, desperate to restore the light.
"You one of us now."
A chorus of voices whispered around me. The light snapped back on, revealing the room now filled with figures. Patients in tattered hospital gowns, their faces pale and sunken, their eyes black voids. They surrounded me, closing in with every heartbeat. A nurse stepped forward, her uniform pristine but stained with something dark. Her face was beautiful, almost human, but her smile was impossibly wide.
"You can't leave,"
she whispered, her voice dripping with malice. I screamed, throwing the flashlight at her. It passed through her as if she was smoke, clattering uselessly to the ground. The figures lunged, their cold hands brushing against my arms and my back. I bolted, my body moving on instinct. I didn't know where I was going, but I didn't stop. Finally, I saw the faint outline of the exit door ahead. As I reached it, the voices rose in a crescendo, screaming my name, pleading, laughing. My hands fumbled with the handle, and for a terrifying moment, it wouldn't budge.
"Stay,"
the nurse whispered, her face inches from mine. With a final desperate shove, the door burst open, and I tumbled into the icy night. I don't remember how I got to my car, only that I drove as fast as I could, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. The hospital still stands, but I've never returned. Yet sometimes, late at night, I hear that voice in my dreams. "You opened it? You'll come back."